Hi guys, in this lecture we're going to be covering array in detail. So if you remember, array is a special variable which can hold more than one value at a time. Let's go and see the example that we have already seen in the data types class. So let's create an array of cars which will have, let's say the first item is Mercedes, the next is a BMW, and you can use single quotes or double quotes to represent a string which stays the same, and you can have, let's say, Fiat. So let's do a console.log and see what cars has in for us. Let's close the output, open the console, let's run. The answer is the array that we created. Now it doesn't matter if you have spaces or you have enter in an array. So this will be element 0, this will be element 1, and this will be element 2. So you can actually access the element which is stored here at the 0th index by doing something like this. Let's say console.log and let's take cars of 0th element. And that's how you can get the 0th element in the, and if I change it to 1 and run it again, it should give me BMW. So that's how you can access an array element. What if you want to push in another array element? Let's say I want to add another car to cars object. So you do cars.push and just give the new car, which is, let's say, Volvo. Let's run it, and you can see Volvo was added even though it was not initialized. And let's say if I give the index of 3, it will run. Now what if I give an index which doesn't fit in, or probably it's not available, because till here it's index of 3 which is available in the array. What if I give a 4? In that case, JavaScript will give you an undefined. You can also create an array by using the object constructor. Just like we created strings, numbers, or date, we can also create array in that fashion. So let's say variable cars2, yeah, I like cars2 better than the cars1. New array of, and I can start passing in my cars out here. Let's say Nissan, let's say Subaru, let's say Chevy. And that will also be a valid array. So you can just do a console.log and do cars2, and you can still see the same answer out here. Okay, let's change this from default to 3 so it's easier. You can see that we have arrays in both scenarios. But for simplicity, readability, and execution speed, use the first option. So arrays are also objects. So if you do a type def of an array, let's say a type of the cars, you can see that it's of type object. So arrays are object. But there is a slight difference when it comes to objects. If you recollect, the object that we created for a person, it was something like variable person is equals to first name John, last name Doe. So that's how we created a person. And to print out a person or to access a person, all you had to do was console.log person dot the first name or the key that you've passed in to the person object, and that should give you the name of the person, which is John. However, arrays can be accessed using an index number, so they don't have names, they have indexes or numbers. One fascinating thing about arrays is that it can have multiple objects in it. What do I mean by that? So let's create an array which is variable mixed array is equals to, you can either create that or you can give this an empty array and then start pushing in elements. So mixed array of 0th element is equals to, let's say I want to do a new date of 12/31/2016. I can do that. Mixed array of first element is equals to, let's say, a function in this scenario. So let's say function, my function, and you can do whatever you want to do in this function. Similarly, mixed array of, let's say, 2 can also be your car's object, which is also an array. So you can have arrays of array. Isn't it fascinating? Yes, JavaScript variables can be object and arrays are special kinds of object. Because of this, you can have variables of different types in the same array. You can have objects in an array, you can have functions in an array, and you can have arrays in an array. Now let's come down to the properties and methods. Of course, just like strings and numbers, even arrays have a set of properties and methods that we can make use of. So the most commonly used property is the length property. What do I mean? Let's go and see an example. So if you want to access an array's length, which means you need to check how many elements are there in that array, so we can do that using cars.length. And that should give out the length of the cars object, which is 4. Now, if you recollect, I did a 0, 1 and 2 out here. I could have very easily done mixed array dot length. In this scenario, it would have been 0. And the same thing out here. And it should still work. No issues. Coming on to the other method, and there are many methods, but one of them that I want to show you is the sorting. So sort, what does sort does? As the name suggests, it sorts the array into an order. So if it's all strings, it will sort it into alphabetical order. So you can see Mercedes, BMW, Fiat and Volvo. When you run the sort on it, let's fix this. And let's clear this and run. You can see it sorted the array in the alphabetical order. Now, one of the very important places where your length can be used, or the way you can access a full array, is using a for loop. So what if you have to go through each and every element of the array and perform certain action? You can very well do that. For those purposes, we use a for loop. So don't worry too much about the for loop. We'll cover the loops in a little detail in the later chapters. But let's just wait and watch. So you do cars.length and you do. So let me just tell you how this loop works so that you understand. You initialize a variable I equals to 0. You say I cannot be greater than or equal to cars.length. So in this scenario, cars.length is 4. So I cannot be greater than or equal to, which means I is less than 4. So it can have values anything which is less than 4, and it was initialized to 0. I++, which means it increments the value of I by 1. So initially it starts with 0, it goes through the loop, it comes back, it increments 1 when the loop gets completed. So this I becomes 1, same 2 and then 3, and then it stops because I cannot be greater than 3. So let's go and print out our element onto the screen and see how we can access the I, and that's it. So rather than putting it the 0, 1, 2, 3 and remembering what index it was, you can automate it by putting it into a loop. Easy peasy, right? And you can get the output. Again, this is just printing it out onto the console, but you can do any dynamic logic out here based off the elements in the array. I also want to bring up a very important point. If you have any background in programming, some languages support associative arrays. What does that mean? It means that you can create arrays with the names instead of the index. JavaScript does not support array with name indexes. In JavaScript, arrays are always numbered indexes. So what do I mean by that? So let's say you can have a new array named array is equals to something. Now what I mean by named indexes is you can create an element in the format of this in other programming languages, but for JavaScript that doesn't work because JavaScript only supports indexes. And you will see it's still an empty array. It will not do any initialization or assignment if you pass in the first name. The moment you remove this and you put in a 0, and everything will start working. You can see John got created. Now let's come to a very important property, or probably a condition I would say, that we need to check. If a variable that we have and I need to make sure that it's an array or not, how do I know that? Well, there are multiple solutions for it. The best that is provided is in ECMAScript 5, and what it does is you can actually say an array dot is array and pass in the array that you want to make sure that it's an array or not. Let's do a console.log of this. If it's an array, what this will give you is a true. That way you can test if it's an array and perform certain conditions on it. Let's create a variable. I am a variable. I know, weird. Is equals to hey there. So that's a string. Now if I check the condition for this to be an array, let's clear, let's run, and the answer would be false. There is also another way, because this ECMAScript 5 may not be supported by older browsers. So remember when we saw instance of, you can use that on the array and check what the instance of array is. So let's say cars instance of array. This will give you, A should be uppercase. So this will give you if the cars is an array or not, and the answer would be true. So using these two conditions, you can check if the variable is an array. Play along with the array, try to add more elements to it, and probably create a new array of the gadgets that you have, and try to do a console log and see if you can work through it. I will see you in the next class.